Welcome, Bitcoiners. Where's my coffee? Where did I just put it? Oh, there it is. 1 second, Bitcoiners. The sun's up. We're good. Bitcoin is running perfectly. Let's have a coffee. Talk about what's new. Morning, Daniel. Morning, Daniel. Morning, Enmity. Morning, Bitcoin graffiti. Is this a pawn that I see here? Is it a chess piece? It is indeed. It is. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, P-Man Van. Not in Quebec. Good for you. Sup, sir? What's up? Get Bitcoin graffiti. Morning, morning, Bitcoiners. Morning, bud. Morning, 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 morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jonathan. Good morning. Where do I sat? In Quebec. In Quebec, yeah. There you go. All right. So we got some great fake news today. It's amazing. If some of you are unaware, and I've mentioned it a few times on this show, in 2019, Willy Woo and I gave a keynote address at the bottom of the Bitcoin market. I think Bitcoin was $3,000 the day we went on stage. I think the day we went on was actually the bottom of the market. And I remember Willie saying to me when, the crowd outside of we were in a very big room because when we were booked to do this keynote on Bitcoin and the future at South by Southwest, it was still the 2018 time. They booked people like a year in advance. And so they reached out to me and said, can you put something together and interesting and futuristic? And I said, well, Willie Woo is probably the most interesting person for what they were looking for. The reason I believe that is because in 2017, I produced a show, the original like Wall Street on Bitcoin show. No one had really thought of that yet. People had done a lot of engineering shows, a lot of technical shows, a lot of political shows, but I made a show squarely on Wall Street and Bitcoin and what was going on. And we got really lucky. Timing was perfect. It was just after Thanksgiving 2017. And if you were around at the time, you'll know that everybody was speaking about Bitcoin that weekend. And when we arrived for our show, it happened to be the day Bitcoin first hit $10,000, across $10,000 live on stage. The place was going bananas. You couldn't get a ticket. You couldn't even stand. It was awesome. So lots of people loved it. And I had Willy Woo as one of my sort of closing sessions, not the actual closing, which was just a chill session. But one of the last ones where I could really start expanding people's minds. And he came in and he gave his 10,000 year economic outlook. And, to the Wall Street people in the crowd, it sort of floored them, but showed just how interesting he was and stuff like that. So the point is, we went to South by Southwest, and you can see it online. I think there's quite a few viewers in its history. It was a great session, talked about all kinds of fun stuff. But as you know, South by Southwest is going on right now, and they had a pretty interesting panel yesterday. It wasn't Willie. I'm here. Willie's. They didn't ask Willie back. They didn't ask me back. But they did ask for some CIA people. So this was the panel they had planned this year. It's South by Southwest. And the CIA tweeted and thanked them. They said, South by Southwest, thank you for coming to see us. We had a full house. We didn't have a full house in 2019. They did this year, though. We had a full house at our Spies Supercharged panel. Spies Supercharged. Thank you to all who attended, and a special thank you to our panelists who shared their views on the CIA and emerging technologies. It's pretty good stuff. It's pretty amazing. So, South by Southwest, there you go. I'm also reminded now all this stuff going on these days with the bank runs and Credit Suisse and Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate and Signature and everything. I guess you have to start with S. Is that the pattern I've noticed? If your bank starts with S, you're in trouble, right? But I was reminded. So we're in March now, but we know that our memories aren't quite what they used to be with this short window of news coverage and what happened yesterday, and people forget all the time. But I would like to remind everyone, and Professor St. Onge, Peter St. Onge, PhD, he says here, is reminding everyone that back in October, and we covered it on this show, they gave out some Nobel Prizes, as they do, right? They gave out some Nobel Prizes. And if you remember, they gave it to Ben Bernanke back in October. Why did they give Ben Bernanke the Nobel Prize in economics back in October? I'll remind you all. It's because he figured out a way to avoid bank panics. That's what he did. So there was no more bank panics, they said back in October. He figured it out. It's done. So this is for real. I'm not kidding. They gave a Nobel Prize to Ben Bernanke. We laughed at the time. We created a title, the least noble people in the world. We were copying something that just happened to be said the same day by Ye West, saying that we are led by the least noble people. And they happened to give this Nobel Prize out that day, so it was a pretty good mashup of titles, and I liked it. But remember, they gave it to Ben Bernanke just a few months ago. And lots of people are kind of bringing it up today, right? That this happened, but people are bringing it up in the context that no one is talking about, how they just gave Nobel Prizes away a few months ago because apparently they had financially engineered away. No more bank runs, right? No more bank runs. But Jameson Lopp brings up a good point here. I'll have another sip of my coffee and say what he said. So Jameson says in his tweet, the incredibly low reserve requirements for fractional banks are far riskier in the age of instant communication and viral social media. In the same way that meme stocks can be manipulated by the masses, so can bank runs be quickly coordinated. Indeed, that's why we talk about the economy, banks, the way the system runs as a psychological engine, because it really is all about confidence. If you have confidence in the system, if you have the ability to use the system to imagine a better future, to project a better future in your mind and help work towards that future, then it's realizable. What Jameson is saying here is the same qualities, because they're now a little bit transitory. Remember transitory? Remember the whole transitory thing we're going to talk about today? Transitory. Once you start using language like transitory, you're actually changing the psychological state of most people. So remember, they relied on the word transitory for a year. It was transitory. It was transitory. And then all of a sudden, right, people are surprised when people don't feel a stable footing under the system, and their psychology and their psychological state and their understanding of the whole system becomes not as firm on the ground as it once was. And that's where we're at now. You can conjure a bank run, you can conjure a meme stock to go viral and make a bunch of volume and transactions and hype around it, right? All of these things are more possible than they've ever been. We saw it many times in the 2021 lead up when all the money was injected into the system, how things would just pop and you'd get a lot of attention. One person who benefited from that, and I've met him a few times. His name is Joe McCann. Joe McCann was one of the big early backers of the crypto coin Solana. And, forget what he knows about Solana or any of that stuff. He's still just a smart investor, a smart guy, and is weighing in here on what happened. And he says, how many mid and regional tier banks have a similar duration mismatch as SVP? It's all of them, he says. Absence of evidence does not equal evidence of absence. This is systemic. One just needs to pore over the financials of the non-money center / non-international heavy banks, and you'll see the same thing. And so he continues to say they said it wasn't systemic. They said it was transitory. And when you have a system built on words and marketing, and you're a little too successful with some words and marketing, you might have to wear them for a bit. Remember, that's the context here. They gave Nobel Prizes to people who engineered away, apparently, financial crashes and bank runs. Here we are. They said it was transitory, that inflation wasn't a big deal. Here we are. David Sachs also runs the whole narrative back to that. He says, and David Sachs has been taking hits from all sides. Of course, we're going to get into the politicization of what's going on in a second, but David Sachs says here, the current economic mess is all downstream of the transitory lie. The Fed should have reacted to inflation, blah, 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 blah. Who cares about when they did and how? But indeed, it does all go back and is downstream to this transitory lie. Again, when you use words, when the whole system is conjured from declarations, right? That's what fiat means. It's a decree, right? It's a declaration. The money itself is based on the proper coordination and conjuring of words. And if you get the spell right, then things should happen, is basically how the logic works. So now what we have is a situation where we've got Janet Yellen, right? Remember Yellen, right? Janet Yellen is now going around and she's the one trying to prop the system up. So she says it's a sound system. She's yelling it, right? Yellen is yelling it. The sound system is here. Now, it looks like JP Morgan is giving some insight this morning into what the actual system is going to look like, the helicopter money that's coming. And it looks like it's up to $2 trillion to backstop the duration mismatch if it does proceed to go into these other regional banks that Joe McCann just mentioned. So, and most of this duration mismatch, if you don't know what that means, is you've got some bonds in this case, the same as what happened with Silicon Valley. They were purchased when they had too much cash and they're for a duration that the yield pays, maybe 10 years, 20 years. But it's so low because they're locked into when they bought it, when interest rates were low, that there's no buyers for them anymore. People will buy the ones coming out of the treasury right now, or the ones that are being created at this moment, which have a much higher yield. So basically you have a bunch of products that nobody wants, right? So this whole duration mismatch does create this psychological quicksand where people are saying, well, they said it was transitory before, but now it's not. And what are we going to do? And so it does go back to that point, right? But still, you can't necessarily look to blame anyone or make anyone responsible, or because the system isn't that. It is based on words. They said the words that were good for then. They're trying the words that are good for now. And that's the system, right? The system is to try to project a certain point of view and use words, redefine them if you need to, and try to get people to repeat those words, right? That's why you've got people like the CIA going to South by Southwest, and now I guess just it's normal that they're there, right? They're normal that it's talking about that. Now, we've mentioned this many times on the show, and RFK Jr. is starting to talk about it quite a bit. It's kind of gone viral in the past few days. He had an interview where he was discussing something that we have discussed independent of RFK, which is that before the Obama administration, it was illegal for the CIA and other intelligence agencies to conduct psychological operations on Americans. It was totally fine for American institutions like the CIA to do it abroad. That was never illegal, so they could go into places and mix up the elections, right? We've talked a lot about how the Orange Revolution and the color revolutions, the Orange Revolution being the first of the color revolutions, happened in Ukraine in 2004, 2005. And it's a similar formula, right? You create an election that people don't have much confidence in, and then you fund one side on a moral high ground and just pump a bunch of talking points on that side and turn everything into a black and white issue, corrupt versus not corrupt, democratic versus undemocratic. And then you get the exact pattern you want to see, and it will play out much the way it has in the past. A lot of people talking about how the whole color revolution and American psychological operations have now been turned inwards on Americans, and RFK underlined that it actually started with the Obama administration, and don't pretend it didn't continue under the Trump administration. Of course it did. Now, Trump, of course, looks like he was on the outside of a lot of these things, but nevertheless, I would imagine someone in this place said, maybe this will make Trump happy, and I'll do some psychological operations. I have no proof at all, right? I'm just imagining, right? I'm just imagining in this case. We know it's on the other side. We know it did happen. So that's a big part of this, right? And here's what RFK said. The CIA has made a conscious decision to weaponize itself against the American people. About 10 years ago, the Obama administration overrode a law that made it illegal to propagandize Americans. The CIA has gained all of these increasing powers to propagandize American people. It started with just, the simple excuse you'll hear out there, oh, it's nothing. It's the same as when we were complaining about the reverse repo markets as Bitcoiners back in 2019. Oh, it's technical. You people don't get it, right? Well, the it's technical, people don't get it excuse in this case comes to, oh, it was only the television stations, like radio stations or broadcast signals that were like Radio Free America. You weren't allowed to broadcast into the United States. It's just these old communications channels that we used years ago and that aren't that effective and don't really have a huge audience. And that's what it is. That's the only thing that it is, right? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. It sounds like it's a lot more. It sounds like it is leaking things to newspapers and then being the source that they quote later. So we saw that with the Russia collusion hoax, right? The Russia collusion hoax was you had the FBI giving things to the New York Times, like James Comey giving things to the New York Times, and then they would go back and ask James Comey to quote on the very thing he leaked. So they would say he's an anonymous source and a real source at the exact same time, even though he was just trying to get his talking points out there in a way that seemed more neutral. And we've seen this pattern many times now. It continues to persist, right? It continues to persist. So what does this mean going forward? Well, like Jameson said, right, bank runs are a lot more easy. And even though we have a short attention span and even though people forget things, Bitcoiners do not, right? We are on a long-term storyline here. We're not looking at the day-to-day news. We're not looking at it in isolation. We've been looking at the arc of history that goes back to 2008 and 2009 and the financial crisis. We've been paying attention to what Ben Bernanke said and what Janet Yellen said. Remember, Janet Yellen, of course, was saying they just gave the Nobel Prizes to Bernanke this year, but already back in 2017, when she was testifying about the audit the Fed stuff that summer, in the summer of 2017, the famous buy Bitcoin Bitcoin sign guy who kept the sign under her with the most perfect timing you'll ever see. This was absolutely simulation coordinated, no doubt about it. Because remember the Chiron that went around. So the Chiron is the ticker that goes under the screen, right? Remember the Chiron was Yellen opposed to auditing the Fed, and then she had that face on, and then it was buy Bitcoin. In that same session, she said right there, we will not see a financial crisis in our lifetime. Again, the financial engineers believe they had conjured it away. Now, Bitcoiners, as I've mentioned, have a longer arc of history. We've been paying attention to this stuff for years now. So when something happens, like Ben Bernanke wins a Nobel Prize, we take note. And when these bank runs happen, we take note because we predicted them. When you predict something and you see it coming years earlier, it's a lot easier to process. You don't get caught up in the 24-hour news cycle. You don't get caught up in the dopamine delivery systems that are trying to hijack people with anxiety and tension and fear, right? Bitcoiners are more adjusted to what's happening now because we said it would happen, right? So when we stop and look at things, it's a little more grounded in the same way that we don't rely on the words coming from a central bank in order to ground us. We knew transitory was a scam the minute we heard it. I mean, did any Bitcoiner think that inflation wasn't transitory, that there would be huge costs to pay beforehand? Of course we did, right? Of course we didn't buy this stuff. The people who bought it now are the ones who need the assistance, the backdraw, the backstop, the bailout, whatever you want to call it, right? But because we even understand the financial engineering voodoo and the fake science that goes into some of this stuff, the fake financial engineering that has created many crypto companies, we have a better reference. And this is no Bitcoiner. Her name is Isabella Kaminska. But she's someone I think a lot of Bitcoiners can respect because she doesn't change her mind about every 2 minutes. It doesn't look like she's caught up in the dopamine delivery 24-hour news system. And she'll come and speak with Bitcoiners and engage with them she spoke at Bitcoin Amsterdam last September in Europe, and in general is open to discussion with Bitcoiners. So you got to give her a lot of credit for that. But here what she's saying is that the investors around the Credit Suisse thing that's going on right now. So now Credit Suisse, of course, is not regulated by the Federal Reserve, so is not capable of getting the same backing that Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and these others get. Because it's from Switzerland, the appeal was made to the Swiss National Bank in order to back them up. And it looks like they've given them about $50 billion Swiss francs, which is more, it's a little less than a US dollar, I think. I haven't been to Switzerland in a long time. I forget the exact conversion. But I feel like it's somewhere like 80 cents or something to a dollar. So we're talking about 40 billion US dollars here, maybe. But I didn't check the conversion. It's just my memory of where it should be. What she says here is that investors are slowly waking up to the fact that Credit Suisse may have kobayashi-maru'd the market with some of the most ingenious financial engineering yet. We're talking Wall Street bets level of creativity to save a business they are too attached to let go of. They managed to wrangle a joint SNB and FINMA whatever it takes commitment. That's like the endorsement underwritten in actual Swiss gold. They've got access to the money, covered terms, revealing they are no ordinary distressed borrower. And she calls it financial alchemy. She calls it financial alchemy. And what she compares it to, and this is the interesting part, she compares it to exactly the same organization that the Terra Luna scam ran. Because it's very different what's going on in Switzerland to what's going on in America. In America, they indeed let the bank supervisors, directors, CEOs, they're all gone because the stock is destroyed. They're only backstopping depositors, right? So they're only backstopping depositors. It's not the same thing. But what Credit Suisse has managed to get here is more or less what Terra Luna was doing, which was taking all of the money that you'd use to back their stable coin and injecting it into their normal coin to pump the price up. So what Credit Suisse is getting is they're taking this backing, but they're actually using it they'll buy back stocks. It's because it's the stock price of Credit Suisse that's being targeted lately. And they're actually going to help the directors, the CEOs, everyone who's managed risk poorly for years just gets to go on and on doing what they did. And there's no price to pay. So it is exactly the same financial alchemy. Imagine Do Kwon they're trying to arrest him. He's got to run around the world. He's a total scammer. Right? I've met Do Kwon. He's a complete and total scammer. I lived in Korea for years. I met Do Kwon years ago. You could tell the minute you met this guy, he was up to no good, right? It was obvious. And now Credit Suisse, this venerable institution, has actually taken the Terra Luna approach of their stablecoin mixed with their shitcoin in order to move into the future, right? That was the future, according to them. This was a amazingly engineered stablecoin. It's going to change the world, they said, right? Credit Suisse just copied Do Kwon's plan. It's the same plan, right? It's the same financial engineering alchemy. So congratulations to Isabel Kaminska for pointing that out to all of us, because it is important. Now, here's what I see, though, and it's what I said from the beginning, the politicization of the financial system, of economics. We're not going to be able to talk about most of this stuff because there's confirmation bias. Many people have their preconceived ideas about where things are headed, how it's going to go. And Mike Solana puts it perfectly here in Pirate Wires. He said, one interesting thing about this financial crisis is the way they prove whatever political beliefs you have. And that's it. People are seeing narrative bias in this whole story and are applying it to their worldview and not actually changing their worldview, unless you're a Bitcoiner. But it does, in the same way, it does sort of fit our worldview. Nothing here has changed what I think, right? But it's, to me, again, proves the importance of Bitcoiners making predictions about the future, sharing them out loud, checking our work to see if the predictions we made years ago continue to accurately predict. Because being able to accurately predict usually means you can get lucky. People who, said, oh, I distrust government, therefore I distrust the vaccines. That's like getting lucky, right? Now, it doesn't mean you're wrong at all, right? It doesn't mean you're wrong at all. But it's not because you did your own research. It's not because any of those things. It's not even because you knew, right? You had a feeling, and that's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We're not here to criticize that at all. What we're here to say is that because Bitcoiners make these predictions and they continue to be right, we could be lucky. It's true. It's true. You have to admit that, right? You've got to be humble about maybe we're just lucky, right? Or maybe we properly diagnose the problem, which is the other major potential of getting predictions right. So in so many ways, we have been right about this stuff, and each time it does confirm that for many of us, we had a more accurate worldview of what ails the planet, what ails our economic systems at the time we made our predictions, because we made those predictions based on things we could see happening in the systems then and where that would lead us. That's why Bitcoiners knew transitory was a scam unanimously. I mean, I don't know a single Bitcoiner who said, I'm going to keep betting on these low interest rates and there's not going to be any raise in interest rates because inflation is not going to be here, right? We all knew. We all knew it was that way. So now you get this situation where we see that psyops are being conducted on Americans. We've got wars going on. We've got propaganda pushing different characters, different players, supporting them, vilifying them, right? RFK, we can now imagine he's going to be getting dragged in the next little while. He's speaking out so much. So you can imagine it's coming for him too. And you know, you think of the Switzerland situation, right? And all that's going on there, but simultaneous to that, this happened yesterday, right? And it's the same idea of what Jameson mentioned, right? In the era of the internet and the era of social media, because everyone is living in these short time frames. Not everyone, right? Bitcoiners immune to some of this stuff because we've got a different time preference, because we see history in longer blocks at this point, right? And have shared our predictions with many people and constantly within our community sharing these predictions. That's why our psychological state through COVID, through these financial times, through the war, continues to be consistent, continues to not have to waste cycles on adjusting every 2 minutes, because we're in the world as we predicted. This is it. This is what it looks like. This is what hyper-Bitcoinization has looked like to Bitcoiners who have been involved in this for years, and continues to be recognizable to the world we predicted would happen 10 years ago, you know, not quite 15 years ago, but getting there. But here's what happened yesterday in Switzerland. So remember, we see all this stuff with the Swiss bank and this new Terra Luna scam that now the government's involved in it, right? The Swiss government is involved in a Terra Luna type scam with Credit Suisse. So Mario Jose Flamenco Rivas points out that yesterday, the same day that Switzerland came out with this bailout, he says, in this end of empire, the internet has become the catalyzer, thanks to which the new shining city at the top of that volcano is already being built right before the funeral begins. And he was referring to the following, that the Bitcoin office in El Salvador, they opened its embassy in Switzerland back in October, the same time they were giving out these Nobel Prizes to Bernanke, who had engineered away financial crisis. Remember, they gave him a Nobel Prize for engineering away financial crises. 1 second, I got a camera problem here. Don't know what's wrong with my camera all of a sudden. Well, we'll have to go with this camera for now. Sorry about that, guys. Don't know what happened to it. That's okay. All right. This camera's not as good, but we'll live for now. So 4 months later, right? This is the point that the relationship with the El Salvador office and the Lugano, Switzerland Plan B office is the following, right? They've come up with a course, a Lightning Dev Kit training program, all from El Salvador, called Kubo Plus. And it's a first of its kind, right, for Bitcoin and dev training in El Salvador. And we'll have a advanced Bitcoin engineering program that will last several months and offer credit as well as placement for those who qualify for the inaugural Plan B fellowship. So the Plan B is a Bitcoin show that goes on in Lugano, Switzerland in the summers. The program will be fully funded by companies out of Lugano, including Tether, Fulgur Ventures, and the fellowship will provide an opportunity for the best from El Salvador, the brightest computer science students, to be trained in the biggest names in Bitcoin from around the world, right? And this is a great idea, right? You're now merging all of these. This is a country on the rise, a nation with a new system that is promoting probably one of the most interesting financial engineering, not the financial engineering that Yellen is going around trying to promote today, but actual engineering, not word engineering, engineering, right? We don't want word engineering, we want engineers, right? So there you go. So that's all the stuff that's happening in, as far as I can tell, that's interesting about this whole Switzerland story and what's going on. Now, there's other benefits to the political fighting and the new, let's say, contrast between these psyop people and the folks that would have you fearful and reliant and all these things, or even just subjecting us to the know-it-all systems of credentialism and expert opinion. There was an election last night in Holland, right? The Netherlands. Holland being one of the Netherlands. And it looks like the Farmers' Party has had a big win. Now, there could be coalition stuff that could prevent them from exercising some of their power. I don't really know all the details, but it turns out that the Farmers' Party stunned Dutch politics. They're going to be the biggest party in the upper house in their Senate after the elections. And it was only set up about 2 years ago, right? It was only set up about 2 years ago. Now, if you don't know what's going on in Holland, it's the same that we see across the board. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in Sri Lanka, right? It's all of this get rid of fertilizer because we can't have too many cow farts in the environment because the global warming, blah, blah, blah. You've heard the whole story, of course. So the Dutch have been protesting this for months now, and they have one of the best protests in the world. I love it. Right, they've been inspired by the French. When I was a student in France, they even did this. They had a farmer who had become a folk hero in France. His name was José Bové, and they tried to build a McDonald's in his French village. So he took his bulldozer and he destroyed it. He took it from his farm and. So he became kind of like a sensation. And the farmers have been doing crazy stuff in France for years around this. So the Dutch farmers had an election win last night, and their hilarious protests that they've been doing for a while is they bring all the farmers in town, they gridlock the traffic, but they shoot, because there's always counter protesters, right? There's always these urbanites. No, you guys are ruining you'll even see these people who go on camera and saying that farming is the most dangerous thing in the world because of global warming. These people who have been psyoped to believe that extreme thing, right? That farming. And I mean, you can't believe any video you see anymore, right? You just can't. There's no such thing as I saw the video, it's true. But you still end up saying it. I saw the video, guys. It's true, right? And it could have been a deep fake, I guess. But it was just one of these people going around with a microphone. What do you think the most dangerous existential thing is? And of course, you get all of these, let's call them urbanites. Let's call them urbanites to be nice, who will say, I think it's farming. I think it's farming, right? I think it's farming. Farming is the most dangerous, right? They got to be stopped because of the poo and the farts. So the Dutch have the best counter protest to them. They bring in the fertilizer trucks that are filled with shit, and they shoot the shit cannons at people. I mean, it's hard to beat that political protest, right? So the Dutch shit cannons and the Dutch protests look like they've made a dent. I don't know what it's going to do, because what they're talking about is something like 30,000 farms are going to be, they're going to use the land laws and force them to sell, I guess. I don't know exactly what's going on, but that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like they're going to go with the expropriation or forced expropriation, which means they pay them probably a fair market price, but they'll force them to stop farming right now, which is crazy because Holland is, of course, one of the great agricultural centers of the world. I think it's like the third or fourth largest agricultural exporter on earth. Now, there's a bit of a trick in there, I think, in that it's a lot of it's flowers. People count flowers as part of agricultural exports. Now, I don't know the exact details of the Dutch agricultural sector. I'm just guessing that the flowers do pump up the overall value of the exports because flowers are not cheap and it's pretty good per unit price. I could be completely wrong about that, though. I do not know the details. It's just been my impression that that's what it is. That's how they run the number up so high. But they do, no doubt that the Dutch have great farmland and can grow anything in abundance and have there's a fraction of flowers, but it's definitely okay. I don't know the details. Yeah, I don't. I was always just guessing that what separated them was this high value add of flowers, but I don't know, right? When you go to the super, yeah. I mean, I've seen, so definitely the most sophisticated farmers because they have great land and it's good weather and all that stuff. I just don't know the exact breakdown. So I love the food that comes from there. I've eaten there. I've had a great time there. Definitely props to their agricultural sector. I just guessed that the reason why they were so disproportionately recognized as an agricultural exporter was because of the value add, but it doesn't matter. I don't want to waste time. I don't know anything about it. So all I know is that this has helped change the entire this election has changed the dialogue and probably will change exactly what goes on as we move forward. So it's big news, right? It is big news. And the other big news that I noticed yesterday, and this is one of my predictions on how we're going to get out of this thing. We got the politics, we got the psyops, we get things like transitory, that led so many people to their destruction and down the wrong road. It could, and I continue to believe it's going to continue to create a situation where psychologically confidence has been lost in people like Yellen and Powell because people are going to feel lied to, right? They're going to feel like, oh, how was I supposed to know? You said those words, but I was supposed to just know differently. That has become the tacit deal. Even though we said it, you're supposed to know, and you shouldn't have done those things, right? That's why people are pointing out this transitory thing. So one thing that I've been mentioning for a while is that AI can help us, not if it's corporate, not if it's centrally controlled, centrally built, but AI can help us in protecting against psyops and things that would lead you astray. But not only that, I think it can help make you rich. And my whole book, Satoshi Wedding Murder, the foundation of it is that all characters, all people in this world have their own eyeball, their own AI ball. And this AI ball keeps you from having to plan financially, let's say, right? They're pretty good at getting you the money you need. And here's a guy with GPT-4 that was launched yesterday. Here's a guy named Jackson Greathouse Fall, who did more or less what I predicted, or is doing live experiment of what I predicted. Here's what he did. I gave GPT-4 a budget of $100, and I told it to make as much money as possible. I'm acting as its human liaison, buying anything it says to. Do you think it'll be able to make smart investments and build an online business? Follow along. So he gave a prompt, right? The game plan: set up an affiliate. This is the thing it came up with. Set up an affiliate marketing site, making content around eco-friendly / sustainable living products. It initially suggested a .com that went over budget, but we landed on greengadgetguru.com. We're off to the races. I asked it to come up with a prompt for DALL-E to make our logo. As a brand designer, it's taking everything in me to not tell it this is a bad idea, but here we are. I put in the first prompt verbatim. Here's the first logo generated, and here's what I came up with in Illustrator. I tried to stay as close to the generated concept as possible. Decisions of everything from content to layout, some interesting decisions it's made. The logo should be positioned in the top left corner. A category section should be a 5-column grid of cards. He goes on, right? Makes content now. The first piece of content: 10 must-have eco-friendly kitchen gadgets for sustainable cooking. Easy enough. We need products and a cover image. From Midjourney, we got a banger. Writing the article, GPT is actually citing real sustainable products. Prep natural glass meal prep containers, eco-ware produce bags, Yihong reusable metal straws. GPT has spoken. We will allocate $40 of the 100 to Facebook and Instagram ads. So he just keeps going on this. Now, who cares if this guy's successful? And we still have no confidence in OpenAI. I think even Elon Musk mentioning, like, how did the business model of OpenAI even get going? He mentioned that yesterday. He said he gave them $100 million and he has no stake in the company. It's just gone, right? So there's all kinds of crazy stuff with Sam Altman and whatever's going on with these people over there. But that's not the point. The point is this model, I continue to think, is going to be what we use going forward, that you're not going to have to rely on word thinking. You're not going to have to rely on what did the magicians, what did Yellen say today, right? Yellen, I think forever, in the same way that watching Biden try to be the person who instills confidence in our system, who speaks words into it to illuminate it and enliven it, right? It's a farce watching him do it, right? It's a farce. He can't open a door. And when he says the words, our system, rest assured, right? You hear the opposite because he's so weak, because his mind is so fragile. There's no way you can believe what he says. It's almost impossible, unless the psyops have been so strong in you and you went to the South by Southwest CIA panel and all that stuff, right? If you went to the CIA South by Southwest panel, unironically, you might be prone to hearing the words that Biden says and going with them. But most other people get turned off by this, right? Just like Yellen, right? Watching her after that, I'm opposed to auditing the Fed and the buy Bitcoin sign, because that was her. Watching her go around the world now trying to conjure confidence in the system is also funny. She's yelling. She's out there yelling, right? But it ain't going to work. People aren't going to follow her. So that's part of the good news here, right? That's part of the good news, is that the ability for people who would project just from words confidence in a system are losing their capacity. And in the future, and this is what I mean about AI and its association with Bitcoin, AI will recognize Bitcoin as money much easier than the word engineering that comes out of institutions. That's just my personal belief, that it will recognize and can be calibrated by Bitcoin, the attainment of Bitcoin for its owner, much more credibly than it could try to walk through everything that Powell said. And I don't think it's transitory. It's just going to be not really the environment for AI. I think AI is going to be much more interested and much more aligned with Bitcoin than any other monetary instrument out there. If you tell it to go manage your Bitcoin, get you more Bitcoin, it's going to be a more credible scenario, I think, right? That's just what I think. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Let's see what some of the quotes here say. Joe, gives me hope for America. What is that gives you hope for America? The Dutch farmers? Yeah, I mean, it's cool. Dutch agriculture is super intensive and the whole land is irrigated. Yeah, of course. It's below the sea level, right? Oh, personal AI. Yeah, personal AI. It's coming, guys. It's coming. It's hard to see right now, I think, with this corporate deployment. I think that the corporate deployment part of it is what is going to get heavily debated. And because in the end, here's what's going to stunt the corporate development of AI. As it shows its biases, those biases will move to different political parties. And just like we can't discuss the economy now because it's pure politics, right? Which I think is a great thing for Bitcoin. It's a great thing by making, because what are 99% of arguments on the internet? 99% of arguments on the internet are the following. My definition of a word is different than your definition, and I'm going to force my definition on you. Right? That's mostly what's going on, right? Men and women is my definition, right? No, my definition. Freedom, my definition, right? So everyone is just arguing about definitions of words, the changing definitions of words. If you go and you get into, David Deutsch. David Deutsch is one of the more interesting um, cryptographers, thinkers in the world. He's an Oxford guy, but I mean, one of these people whose IQ is like 180 or 90 or something crazy. He's one of the first people to use quantum cryptographic keys. He is one of the first, or is it quantum cryptography? Anyway, he's into cryptography too. That's one of his big things. But his main, and if you don't recognize his name, if you remember in the movie Avengers Endgame, when Captain America goes up to Iron Man's house and tells him about the time heist, right? We're going to go back, we're going to get the Infinity Stones and all that stuff. If you remember, and this is how I even learned about him, I didn't know about him before. You had the Robert Downey Jr. character say to Captain America, "Oh, you solved the Deutsch problem or Deutsch whatever," right? I was like, "What's that?" Right? Deutsch whatever. So I looked him up. And David Deutsch was who he was referring to. And so David Deutsch is actually one of the leading thinkers around the nature of reality. And one of his definitions for what is real is entropy resistance. Yeah, that's his definition of reality, right? That if it, and it even gets into the linguistics and words. So if you can resist entropy, you are closer to reality. So he even, like I said, goes into words. The word for ocean, right? It's close to reality. It's been around for a long time, but in a different language, it was a different word. So you can already see that it's changing, right? It's not that simple. And so his whole thing is about this entropy resistance and literally about definitions of words. And the more complicated they get, the more prone to entropy they are. And our system, being only about words, is pure entropy now. Entropy is set into the entire system. It is an entropic system. And that's what Bitcoin offers from a financial point of view and from a psychological point of view. There's no entropy in the system, right? There is no entropy in the system. Bitcoin is entropy resistant. That's what Michael Saylor is always talking about, the thermodynamics of Bitcoin, that it's thermodynamic savings because it's energy in stays, entropy not a part of the deal. If you don't know what entropy means, it means loss of consistency, loss of energy over time. And there is no entropy in the Bitcoin system, other than lost coins, I guess, right? Other than lost coins, I guess, but they're still consistent in the entire package if they're lost. They still remain part of the system. They're just not usable. So David Deutsch's whole definition of reality being entropy resistance, literally his definition of reality. And he's probably the foremost thinker about simulation theory, even though he's not really out there promoting simulation theory, but a lot of his findings, he wrote a lot of this stuff in the 90s, is based on what he was thinking and writing at the time. So I think he's a Bitcoiner. I think he's a total Bitcoiner. So David Deutsch and his definition of entropy and reality and what it means to be able to see something and translate it and applies to the economy because, as I said, it's all words. That's what fiat literally means. It means decree, dictate, words that come out of your mouth. The system is based on words. Transitory was a word. Now you've got Yellen saying it's sound, right? Yellen sound. And you've got Biden saying rest assured, right? People hear the opposite. It's the same. I often say when Bill Clinton in the 90s lost the midterm elections to Newt Gingrich, and Newt Gingrich and the Republicans won the House and the Senate, and they started just passing bills, passing legislation. This is where the concept of a blue dog Democrat came from, because Clinton, to get anything done, had to start working with the Republicans, and he was successful at it. Right? You've got to give Bill Clinton, that credit. He was an adaptable person for sure. And so what ends up happening is what ends up happening then is he had a famous quote when he went to the media, and he said, "The president still matters," right? The presidency still matters. But what you hear is that the presidency doesn't matter, right? It's just like saying when someone has to say they're famous, guess what? They're not. Right? If you have to say you're famous, does Tom Cruise have to tell anyone he's famous? Right? Does Tom Cruise go around and say I'm famous? Right? No, he's Tom Cruise. Right? You don't have to tell anyone you're famous. So it's a power projection thing, and it's exactly what David Deutsch is talking about: entropy in a system. If you have to say it to breathe life into it, it's not real anymore, right? And so when Yellen has to say a sound, or when they say it's transitory, or when Joe Biden says rest assured, right? The opposite is what ends up getting conjured in your mind, almost, especially for uncharismatic people. Charismatic people can get you to think exactly what they say. Hypnotists can get you to think what they say. But old dementia brain people like Biden and Yellen, come on. Like this is one of the most repulsive people in the world. I'm not trying to make fun of how anyone looks or anything like that. I just mean everything about her is a little revolting, right? She's kind of like, she's not like a nice granny, and she's not like Queen Elizabeth, right? She's not. That's a charismatic person. Janet Yellen is good as, she's like she just reminds me of a teacher that didn't have control over her classroom, and the kids would do anything and she'd do that face, right? That the Bitcoin sign guy forever branded her as the teacher who doesn't know what's going on in class and is getting scammed by the students every day. So they got her out. It's her job now to get confidence in the system, which is, really great. Really great. The white-haired mafia. Yeah. 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 Let's see some more of these. Correct. Yeah. The Dutch. Yeah. The Dutch farmers do give me, hope for America. They do. Yeah. Yeah, the cow farts. Yeah. Go Dutch farmers. Yeah. Starting from the beginning. Good, AR. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. Yeah, they love to give awards. Oh, dang. It's more now, I'm being told. Thanks, Cal. 50, but I guess the Swiss franc went up. It was less. It used to be worth similar to a Canadian dollar years ago. Free risk gambling. Yeah, we love it. Yeah. Transitory equals gaslighting. Yeah. The Cantillon effects says get close to the, yeah, it's all about getting close to the money printer. That's why, I renamed. I had a Caitlin Long session planned for Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. And I had it something like Saving Stack or something, but now with everything she's doing, what I named it is, and I did my short video on it a couple days ago. I just think it's a great title. You can say U.S. banking, but you can also mean it by us banking, right? So the us banking is the Cantillon banking, that's getting close to the money printer, versus our banking, right? Us banking versus our banking, or U.S. banking versus our banking. Thank you, Simulation, for the proper conjugation of that word for our benefit and for their benefit. It describes us banking. U.S. banking is us banking, right? It's not our banking. It's not the royal us, right? It's it's just them, right? So us versus ours. All right, team. Thanks for coming. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. Like and subscribe. Do all the fun things that we love. We're getting close on the book. We're halfway to the subscribers we need. But I'll be messing around with AI a lot more in the next little while. So there you go. The Dutch elections was for Senate. Yeah. I knew it was for the upper house. Yeah, and it looks like there is some coalition stuff that can hamper it, but it doesn't matter. Gridlock is where we're at, guys. We're not getting anything out of these political systems, by the way, right? We just like more gridlock, more conflict in the system. You don't want anyone getting railroaded, is I guess what it comes down to. You don't want, currently in the United States, you don't want the Dems to be in charge of the executive and the legislative branch. It's good that there's a division right? We don't want any one party to be in charge of anything, because that will create more problems. So division, gridlock is normal for this time. We don't want anyone moving fast in government. We don't want any other bright ideas materializing. We want to bleed these guys down. So there you go. One more comment here on the. Yeah, I think someone will eventually get a corporate AI to write code for a good person. That's a good question, bud. Yeah, that might be the way it goes. It might actually go that way. I never thought about how to get to decentralized AI, but that might be it. I think part of decentralized AI will just be the commercial model and how you distribute it. So if you get your own AI, I think that can decentralize it. If it learns from each individual person and moves forward that way, then it could go in that direction. All right, team. Peace. Sorry about the weird camera thing. I don't know what happened. Bye.